I've been walking into Meridian General through the main entrance for 8 years. Always the same way. Through the glass doors, past the information desk, through the main lobby toward the administrative wing on the left side. I never called ahead. I never wore a badge. I dressed the way I dress, practically, without much thought for impression, because I was not coming to impress anyone and because, in 8 years, it had never occurred to me that I would need to. On a Tuesday morning in March, a new receptionist was working the main checkpoint. She was young, perhaps 23, doing her job with the focused energy of someone who is new enough to still be uncertain about the rules and compensates by applying them more rigidly than someone with experience would. She saw me cross the lobby toward the administrative corridor, and she stepped out from behind the desk. "Ma'am." Her voice was professional. "This area is restricted. Can I see your credentials?" I told her I didn't have a badge, that I was there for a quarterly meeting with the administrative team, and that they were expecting me. She asked for my name, so she could check the visitor log. I gave it. She looked at the log. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. And I watched something happen in her expression that I recognized from other contexts, a small recalibration, a conclusion reached quickly and held with the confidence of someone who trusts their own assessment. "I'm not seeing your name here," she said. "I'm going to need you to step back to the main entrance." I said that there might be an error in the log and that I could wait while she made a call. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, in a voice that carried across the nearest quarter of the lobby, "Ma'am, you don't belong here. Leave now." The waiting room held perhaps 30 people. All of them heard. And from the security station near the east entrance, I watched 2 uniformed guards begin walking toward me. That was when the man in the chair stood up. He had been seated near the far wall, close enough to the main corridor that I had passed within 20 feet of him on my way through, not close enough that I had looked directly at him. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, in the jacket that cardiac surgeons seem to favor between procedures. Not scrubs, not a white coat, the jacket of someone who is between one thing and the next. He stood up. He looked at the receptionist. He said, in a voice that was absolutely calm, "Do you know who she is?" The receptionist looked at him. The guard stopped walking. The lobby went so quiet I could hear the ventilation system. The receptionist's face went completely pale. Before I tell you what he said next, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Now, let's begin. My name is Eleanor Hartman. I am 52 years old. And the first time I walked into Meridian General, I was unconscious. It was 8 years ago, on a Wednesday evening in October. I had been at a work event. I ran a small manufacturing company that my father had started and that I had been running for 11 years, and sometime after the dinner portion, and before the presentations concluded, I had experienced what the people around me described as a sudden collapse. The ambulance brought me to Meridian General's emergency department. What I had experienced was the acute onset of a cardiac condition called hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, a thickening of the heart wall that had been present for some time and had finally reached a threshold that my body could no longer manage quietly. The emergency department stabilized me. The cardiac team assessed me through the night. By Thursday morning, the head of cardiac surgery, a doctor named Daniel Park, was standing at my bedside explaining that I needed a procedure and that the procedure was complex and that he had performed it enough times to be confident, but that I should understand what I was agreeing to. I agreed to it. The surgery took 6 hours. I was in the ICU for 4 days. I was in the cardiac recovery unit for 11 days after that. Those 11 days were the ones that changed everything. I want to describe the cardiac recovery unit as it was 8 years ago because the description matters for what came after. It was a functional space. Adequate. The kind of adequate that is not inadequate in any specific way that you could point to and say, "This is wrong, this must be fixed." The equipment worked. The nursing staff was excellent and clearly stretched thin. The waiting area for families had chairs that had been there for 15 years and a water fountain that was near enough, but not quite near enough. The lighting in the patient rooms was institutional in the way that makes the days blend together. There was a small room at the end of the hall where families could sit privately, and it held 4 chairs and a table and a window that looked out at a concrete wall. I noticed these things because I had nothing to do for 11 days except notice things. I also noticed the families. The people who came in every morning and stayed until visiting hours ended. The parents of the teenager in the room beside mine who had been born with a cardiac condition and was there for her third surgery. The husband of the woman across the hall who had slept in his car in the parking structure every night because the family waiting room was too small and too hard to get to in the middle of the night when he needed to be near her. I noticed the nurses managing 6 patients, each on a shift designed for 4. I noticed Dr. Daniel Park doing rounds at 6 in the morning and again at 7 in the evening, not because anyone was requiring him to, but because he appeared to be constitutionally incapable of leaving when there was something he could check on. On the 10th day, my company's CFO came to review some documents that needed my signature, and I asked him a question that he later told me he had not been expecting. I asked him what it would cost to give this unit what it needed. He thought I was confused from the medication. I was not confused. I sold my share of the company 2 years after my recovery. Not because of the hospital. I had already begun the foundation work by then separately, but because I had come out of that surgery with a clarity about what I wanted to do with the remainder of my time that made running a manufacturing company feel like the wrong use of it. The Hartman Family Foundation's first major commitment was to Meridian General's cardiac unit. I will not detail the full amount because it is not the point of this story. What is the point is what it funded. New equipment across the unit, a renovation of the patient and family spaces, additional nursing positions for 2 years while the hospital worked to make them permanent, and a new family support room at the end of the hall, larger, with a window that looked at something other than concrete. The unit was renamed. The name is on the wall when you turn left off the main lobby corridor. It has been there for 6 years. I come to the hospital 4 times a year for meetings with the administrative team and occasionally with Dr. Park's department. I have never found it necessary to announce myself because, in 8 years, no one at the main checkpoint had failed to recognize me or my name on the visitor log. The Tuesday in March was the first time the log had been wrong, and the first time the person at the desk was someone new enough not to know. Dr. Daniel Park had operated on my heart 8 years ago. He had stood at my bedside the morning after I arrived in his unit and explained a complex procedure in language I could understand, with a specific quality of clarity that comes from someone who has enormous respect for the person they are talking to and for the decision that person is about to make. He had done rounds at 6 in the morning and 7 in the evening for 11 days while I was in his unit. When I sat with my CFO and began asking about the costs of what the unit needed, I had sent Dr. Park a message first. Not asking permission, but because I thought he deserved to know that someone was thinking about what he was working with. He had responded within an hour. He was not surprised that I had noticed. He was, he said, grateful that I was asking. In 6 years of the Hartman unit, I had seen Dr. Park at every administrative meeting I attended. I had watched the equipment improve and the nursing ratios improve, and the family room at the end of the hall become a place that actually worked for the people who needed it. We did not have what most people would call a friendship. We had something more specific than that, the particular relationship of a person and the doctor who held their heart in his hands for 6 hours, which is its own category. When he stood up from his chair in the main lobby that Tuesday morning, he had seen me crossing toward the administrative corridor. He had watched the interaction at the checkpoint unfold. He had given the receptionist enough time to reach the conclusion she reached, and then he had stood up. "Do you know who she is?" he said. The receptionist looked at him. The guards had stopped. The lobby was quiet. The receptionist said she didn't, that she had checked the visitor log and the name wasn't there. Dr. Park looked at her for a moment. Then he looked past her, toward the left corridor, toward the wall where the signage was. "Read the name on the wall," he said. "The wall to your left, at the entrance to the cardiac unit." The receptionist turned. She read. She turned back. What crossed her face was not just recognition. It was the specific expression of someone who has just understood the full dimensions of what they have done, the particular vertigo of realizing that the context they were missing was not minor. She looked at me. I looked at her. I did not say anything. Dr. Park walked across the lobby and stood beside me. "Eleanor," he said, with the same calm directness he had used 8 years ago at my bedside. "I'll walk you up." The administrative meeting that morning was routine in the way that quarterly meetings are routine, updates, numbers, questions about the next phase of a staff development program the foundation had been supporting. I sat across from the hospital's administrative director and 2 department heads, and we covered the agenda in about 45 minutes. Before I left, The administrative director mentioned that she had been told about the incident at the checkpoint that morning. She was precise and professional about it. Not dramatic, not excessive. She said she wanted me to know it was being addressed, and that the visitor log error, which turned out to be a scheduling system migration that had failed to transfer certain recurring appointments, had been corrected. I thanked her. I did not need more than that. On my way out, I stopped at the family room at the end of the cardiac unit corridor. I do this sometimes when I'm in the building, not every visit, not as a ritual, but when I have a few minutes and the unit is quiet enough that stopping doesn't feel intrusive. I stand in the doorway and I look at the room, the chairs that work, the window that looks at something other than concrete, the table where families sit at 2 in the morning when they need to be near someone. I think about the husband who slept in his car in the parking structure. I think about the parents of the teenager having her third surgery. I think about 11 days of noticing things and a question I asked my CFO that he thought was the medication talking. Then I walk back out through the main lobby, past the checkpoint, through the glass doors, and into the day. The receptionist was doing her job. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. She was following a protocol that made sense on its face, and the failure was a system failure, a log that hadn't transferred correctly, not a failure of her judgment in the way that some of the other stories in this world are failures of judgment. The words she chose, "You don't belong here, leave now," those I would do differently. Not because they were aimed at me specifically, but because they are not words that serve anyone well in a place where people come at their most frightened and their most vulnerable and their most in need of being treated as if they belong exactly where they are. Meridian General, at its best, is not a place that tells people they don't belong. The room at the end of the cardiac unit corridor is evidence of that. Dr. Park standing up from a chair in the main lobby is evidence of that. Some places become what they are because someone sat in a recovery unit for 11 days and noticed what was missing. I am glad I noticed. I am glad he stood up. And I am glad that the name on the wall is one that, going forward, the person at the main checkpoint will know how to read.